Alright, what's up guys? I'm back. First off, I want to just shout out to everybody that gave love to the first video. Thank you very much. It's surprising to know that a lot of supporters have been with me for a lot of years, all the way dating back to when I just started making AMVs. I'm really thankful for that. Thank you guys for all the love and support, and hopefully that these videos are enjoyable to you guys. Okay, so first off, how do we get started? To make AMVs, the softwares that us in the community usually use are Adobe After Effects, a really in-depth motion graphics video editing software that's pretty standard for most AMV users. You could also make AMVs under DaVinci Resolve. The free version, great version, does pretty much everything that you need for an AMV, if not more. And it's a really great alternative if you don't want to pay that premium Adobe price tag. And then after that, we have Sony Vegas Pros. If you're an OG, 2017 or before even, Sony Vegas Pro is also a wide known software that we use to make AMVs. Yeah, but that's also a good option as well. We have CapCut and Final Cut Pro. So in terms of software, I think the main three or top three for heavy editing, motion graphics, and good visual effects, you would use Adobe After Effects, DaVinci Resolve, and Sony Vegas Pro. But if you're going more into just stitching clips together through a music video and not really worrying about motion graphics, speed graphs, and then like all the pops, CapCut and Final Cut Pro could be your option as well. Now for the tools to make AMVs, I would say obviously technology, a laptop, iPhone, phone, Android, or PC. I think most people would know that PC you would usually use to make the best kind of AMVs or GMVs to make possible. I use a sketchbook to write down notes, timeline, the songs, make notes of what I want in the AMV videos, just a bunch of different things to just jot down whatever idea I have in my head. So a sketchbook is really important to me to make my AMVs. And then design assets, so like resources online of websites like typography, typeface websites. Other design assets would be sound effects, film grains, textures, matte maps. So that's all mainly the things that you would need to get started. Yeah, so one main thing I want to highlight before we continue is that when making AMVs or GMVs, it means that you are taking other artists, musicians, and studios' work and just remixing them. You do not own anything, so always give credit to the original creators. And I really stress this, that it's really important that you give credit to where credit's due. At the end of the day, we are just remixing other people's work for creative expression and just express our own freestyle on making music videos. Alright, so getting into it, here's the general design process of how I usually go about making my AMVs. So we would go through resource gathering, like I said. Then I go to the assembly cut planning, then creating transitions, VFX and fine tuning, and lastly, export management. Cool, so the assembly cut. What is the assembly cut? In definition, it's made by assembling all of the crucial video clips and media in order of how they will appear on screen. Sounds simple enough. This applies for GMVs as well. You have about 4 flavors of aspect ratios. So the most common one is 9:16. Then we have the ultra wide of 21:16. And then for socials like Instagram, Twitter, mainly Instagram and TikTok, we have 16:9, which is the real, and then a 4:5 ratio. So yeah, here we are in After Effects. This is the general user interface that you're going to be faced with when you just start out using this software. So let's just go through some quick things. So when you get in, you'll be set up with this blank user interface. Like I said, this is the default right here on the top right. You'll see which workspace you're in. On the left is where you would add your assets, like your video clips. This is your timeline on the bottom. And then here's the viewport area. And then on this side, over here would be the effects control panel, where you would change any settings that you make to any effects that you apply to clips, some miscellaneous tools that you would need. Alright, cool. So let's make a new project. So to do that, you would always start with Control N. And then you would name it. Let's just name it Demo. And now from there, you press Enter, and now you would create this first composition. To change settings to your compositions at any time, you can use the shortcut Control K, and it'll bring up the composition settings again. You can change settings to be 4K, change it to be a social media portrait size, like the other ratios that I mentioned before. So let's just set up this timeline to be about 5 seconds only, just for the demo. Click OK. And now we're ready to start. Planning the assembly cut. When it comes to planning the assembly cut, for me, first you would listen to the song and grab your favorite part, because we're not going to use the whole song. That would be copyright. It's not ours. Generally the trend is that we choose a favorite section of the song, be it 5 seconds to 10 seconds to 30 seconds, however long. Grab that favorite part and then move on to the next step. Second step in the assembly cut for me is to storyboard the anime or game footage to the song. I do this by jotting down notes in my sketchbook like I mentioned. So I would draw out the timeline of the song. I would break down the song piece and then jot down key mark points in the song that I want to emphasize when making the video. And then from there I would just note down anything right under it, like design styles that I want to use, some emphasis that I want to take in on the beats, on the sounds, the hi-hats. I would jot down any notes of the anime or the game that I want to use, like the footage, anything that sticks out to me in the footage. I would jot down right under the timeline as well. And that's basically how I storyboard everything in my notes. And then the third and final step in the assembly cut for me is to place them in a timeline. And that's where you generally do the assembly cut in whatever software that you're using, be it After Effects, DaVinci Resolve, Cut Pro, what else did I say? CapCut or Sony Vegas. So when dragging your clips for the assembly cut, you would hover over to the very left panel and then select this box. Make sure it's highlighted in blue. And then press Ctrl I to open up your file manager, and then you can paste all your assets in right away. Also, another way to import things if you don't want to use a shortcut is just to double click on this left panel and it'll pop up the same file manager window. Alright, so now I have my footage inside, but as you can see, they are not videos. I don't want to use anime clips in this tutorial because of copyright and everything like that, like I mentioned before. So these are just still images, but I can still use them to show all the effects and the techniques that we use for making AMVs. So how to put things onto the timeline, you simply just grab your source file and just drag it into the timeline like this. And it'll be there, presented like that. Cool. Press spacebar to press play and it'll just roll through the footage. So cool, now you got a plan to assemble your clips. Now let's get into making transitions into your clips and creating a flow. So the best way to do this is to ease your way into a flow. And what that means for softwares that can do speed graphs like After Effects and DaVinci Resolve and Sony Vegas, it means that we play with graphs. Okay, so to add flows into your edit, you generally want to think about two things. The first one is speed footage and time remapping it. And then the second one is speed transitions through the graph editor. So first, let me quickly walk you through the first one, which is the speed footage. So here I just have B-roll footage of my desk setup. One thing before you start, I think it's important to note, on the very left, you'll see on the viewport here, on the very left, your footage might be rendering as full. I recommend just putting it in half or third most of the time, just to save on resources for your computer. Even though it's probably strong or whatever it is, however it's built, it's best to just practice having it at third or half just to save on resources. So when you press play to preview your video, it doesn't take forever to render. Cool, now I have the clip cut down to my desired length. You can imagine this as like an anime footage of a scene that you're trying to time remap for flow. So you'll have the beginning part up to the end part. And what I do is I time remap everything natively in After Effects. I don't use third-party plugins like Twixtor to time remap. I've never used it. So first off, we're going to start off by selecting the layer, then press Ctrl-Alt-T. And then we'll access the time remap setting in the timeline here. And from there, you just want to click on this keyframe node and it'll create your first keyframe. Keyframes are very important. I suggest watching another YouTube video to learn about keyframes and how they work and how they mainly affect your speed graphs. Keyframes are basically the building blocks to your edit, so they're very important. First things first, we'll add a keyframe at the beginning of the clip. And then we'll add another keyframe at the very end of the clip on the last frame. I'm going to go back to the start of the clip. And then to move frame by frame, for me, it's page down. So I would click 1, 2, 3, 4, and I can move back and forth one frame at a time. I think you could also use your keyboards like arrow keyboards. But for me, it's just page down. So we'll go 1, 2, 3, 4. Set another keyframe, go to the end of the clip. We'll go 1, 2, 3, 4. Set another clip. And what you essentially do after you create these two keyframes in the inside, we're going to push these keyframes back on each other by 2 frames. So 1, 2, 1, 2 on both sides. And what you're essentially doing is stretching out the keyframe in preparation to time remap it. So now that we have it stretched out, we're just going to cut off the excess behind the second keyframe of each side. Here in the beginning clip, and then cut the excess on the right side at the end of the clip, and now we have it prepped. From here is now where you want to play around with how long you want this footage to last. So we have this footage of me opening this notebook up like this, and I want to time remap it for about 2 seconds. What you want to do is just grab the end of the keyframes at the end of the clip and just push them all the way back to the left, essentially squeezing the clip down to a faster time speed. What you want to do, select all your keyframes and then look for the graph editor icon. This is important. So click this graph editor icon to access your keyframing graph. What you want to do now is press F9 on your keyboard and essentially easy easing your keyframes. Once you've done this, you'll also see back on the timeline that your keyframes have changed shape from diamonds to a different shape like these. So from here, when we preview it, it's still constant speed, really fast, but just a little smoother compared to the last time. So just to dissect this graph editor real quickly, the x-axis represents the frames of the timeline, which is here. So 4 frames, 8 frames, 12 frames to 1 second, basically the timeline, so how long the clip lasts. And then the y-axis is representing the amount of speed effect that you want to give to it. So what we have with this is what we want to do is we want to play with the speed. For AMVs, generally the trend is that most people want to speed up the clip and then have it taper off to slow down and then speed it up at the very end. So what you'll see will create this sine curve. And then in practice, it'll play like this. Speed up, it'll speed up quickly, slow down, speed up again. So I cleaned up my keyframes a little bit, and this is the graph that I came up with, and you'll see when I play it, it'll speed up quickly, then taper off to a normal speed, then speed up again. And this is the speed that you're gonna see in most edits. Now another method I like to use when creating flow into my edit is by manipulating the transform options of the clip itself. So if we select the layer of the clip, we can go down to the very left and look for this. It's very small, but it's this arrow to signify a drop down menu. And when you click it, you can see a menu tab for transform, which is this. What you want to do is just drop that down and you can see all these settings that you have offered. For me, in my edits, I mainly just use these 3: rotation, scale, and position. So now I'm going to quickly show you what I do to create some flow with these 3 settings. So for position, you can also access this option by pressing P. And then what I like to do is start by adding a keyframe at the beginning and also the same keyframe at the end. And then by adding this keyframe at the end, you're signifying where it's going to end up at the end of the clip when it plays through. So if we go back to the footage at the beginning of the clip, we're going to move it. So for me, I like to make it cinematic. So you can imagine like a camera panning to the side, left or right, very slowly. I like to add that in my edits. So I usually just move it back to the left just a little bit. And then when we play through, you can see that the footage moves slightly to the right. And then you can do it on either side. You can also do it to the left. And it just pans to the left slowly, which is pretty nice. And what I also like to do is manipulate the scale. For scale, it's the same thing, just slow moving. If we have it to scale, we can start it off at say around 100 and 105% from the original, and then have a keyframe there, and then also put a keyframe at the end. And then at the beginning, we're just going to manipulate it to start at 105%. And then we want it to end at 100% scale. We'll make it more dramatic. I'll probably pop this to, let's make it more dramatic. I'll pop it up to 160. And then this will be 150. Or go to we'll go to 120. As you can see, it fades out very slow. It zooms out very slowly, very cinematic. And then the last one is rotation. So with rotation, for rotations the same thing. I usually like to make them very slow, very small detailed. So we can set a keyframe for the beginning to 2, and then we can have it end off at -1. And then when we play it, it rotates out. Very nice. And then just a quick demo of how this can work out is you can combine rotation and scale together, and then keyframe scale back out. And then what you want to do is press U to access all of your keyframes that you have created. And then we want to manipulate scale, keep the same settings for rotation, and then have it out to 130 or 120 like we did. And then you'll have something like this where it slowly zooms out like that while rotating. And that's just another way you can add flow by using scale, position, and transform. Keeping the ball rolling, let's go into speed transitions. And with speed transition, this is a technique where we essentially try to flow into one clip into the next clip. So let's start off by grabbing our first clip again, and then we're gonna add a second clip now into the mix. So we have 2 clips, 1 and 2. And with speed transitions for AMVs, we have 3 main buckets. First one is the pan crops, second is swipes, and third we have smear frames or frame animations. So for this section, I'm gonna basically fly through this. Hopefully you guys are more comfortable with creating keyframes, but don't worry, with this video I'm gonna provide the project file of all the techniques that I'm gonna show in this video, and you can just explore that, break it down, and study all the keyframes that I've made and how I create my own transitions and all of that stuff. So don't worry if you get lost in this video. I'm gonna provide that to you guys, and you guys can just learn it on your own time. So what I want to do here is we have these 2 clips. We're just going to change the color to a different color, like pink. And how I do pan crop, we're going to start with pan cropping. So with pan cropping, how I do it is we're going to create an adjustment layer. There's 2 ways you can create an adjustment layer. You can either hover over this blank area of your timeline and right click on your mouse and hover over new and just press adjustment layer. That's how you create your first adjustment layer. And with this adjustment layer, we're going to add to our effects panel on our right, the transform plugin, if I can spell. And then just grab it from here and then drag it onto your adjustment layer like that. Alternatively, you can also create the adjustment layer shortcut by pressing Ctrl Alt Y. Then you'll have another adjustment layer just like that. So we have the transform effect onto our adjustment layer here, and this panel you can see the settings. And with pan cropping, it's basically the effect of a clip zooming out really quickly and then zooming back in and then zooming back out really quickly again. So in practice, this is how it's going to be. But you guys will probably recognize it once we create it. So we're going to start off with scale. So first off, let's select the adjustment layer with the transform plugin. We're going to select the scaled option and then create a keyframe on it. Press U to double check that you've created the scale option. And then from there, we're going to start it off with 180 on the value. Then from there, I have a rule where I just go out 10 frames out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then add another keyframe. And then from this keyframe, we're just going to put it back to 100%, which is its original size. And then from here, we're going to select all these keyframes again. And then remember to easy ease through F9. This essentially means we're going to have to use the graph editor again to change the speed. And then from here to pan crop, we're going to change the first node, which is set to 180. And then change it down to this. We're going to change it down to this shape, bringing that down. And then from there, we're going to grab the next keyframe over here and then changing its shape. And then you can also hold down shift to accurately control this, and then you want to just set it like that, and you'll see this common zoom out effect in most edits. And then what I like to do is I like to add artificial blur. So what I use is radial blur. We'll go back to, we'll type in radial, and then we'll grab the radial blur, add it to the adjustment layer. So now we have it added in the effects here in our adjustment layers, and as the default, we're going to change this type from spin to zoom. And then what I use is I started off at around either 10 or 20 on the amount. So we'll go in between, we'll go around 18. And then we'll start it off as 18, and then it'll die off 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It'll die off to 0 on the amount. And what radial blur does, just smoothens out the zoom out effect even more, and it just makes it more clean, in my opinion. You can see that it's a nice bounce to it. So in practice, if you want to clip this from here, if you want to clip it from the first clip and then add another pan crop to the second clip, set a keyframe here to 100, and then set a keyframe here to 180 again, and then go back here. We'll set a keyframe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, also 100. And what we want to do is, as this timeline goes, we want it to zoom in again and then zoom out after. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna put this as 180 right before the first clip ends, and then this clip 2 is already starting at 180, and then we're gonna go back 10 frames out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Make another keyframe, and then set it to 100. Select your keyframes, go to the graph editor, and then with this one, when it's gonna end, when clip one's gonna end, we want to do the opposite. So we're gonna drag the node, we're gonna edit the shape of the graph to be the opposite. Then with the beginning of the second clip, the first keyframe, we're gonna basically copy this shape over to here. So like this, like that. What we want to do is also grab the radial blur, these keyframes here, which is affecting the radial blur right here. Grab them over here. The cool thing is you can select them. You can press Control C and then Control V to copy and paste. But be careful and make sure that there's a 0 keyframe behind this one, because if not, it's gonna be keeping this effect right here. So if we go to the graph editor, see how it's over here, it's gonna be 18 down to 0, but then it gradually builds up back to 18. We don't want that, so we're gonna go back 1 frame and then turn it to 0. So now we have our transform keyframes that are pan cropped like these. And when we play it, we have the pan crop transitions. Back. And the cool thing is with this system, you can also just manipulate. If you want it to be 1 second, you could literally just grab the end of the clip 1 down there, and drag everything to be the same like that. And then it works for 1 second. The next transition that we commonly use is swipes. So for swipes, I have 2 techniques. So the first technique that I use goes just like this. So I'll start a keyframe here in the beginning, and then I'll start another, and then I'll go out 10 frames and then put another keyframe here. And depending on where you want to start it, I'll start on the right. We'll move it all the way out to we'll move this clip all the way out to the viewport, turn on this motion blur. We'll select the first clip and then turn on the check mark for motion blur. So that means After Effects will automatically put motion blur on it without having to use plugins or effects. See that? It has motion blur on it already. What we can do with this is also easy ease. And then for this one, we're gonna have to use, actually gonna have to use the speed graph. So the speed graph looks different from the value graph, and the value graph we were using this whole time was these curves. So now we're gonna have to use the speed graph. And what we do with the speed graph is basically the same thing. The x-axis represents the timeline of your footage, and the y-axis represents the value of your speed. So for this case, for me, I would push this back. So what you can see here is same thing. It moves up really quickly, peaks, and then it slows down right here at the end. So you can see if we play it, it's quick and then slows down, quicks and slows down. We can exaggerate it to 1 second. So it'll look like this, very quick. Then it slows down off. When we play it, very quick, like that. The cool thing is when you make one keyframe pattern just like this, you can really just Control C and then copy it to the next one over here on your second clip. And then you can grab your second clip and then put it over the first clip. Have this swipe transition as well. Don't forget to put on your motion blur, and then you'll have this effect. And another swipe technique that I like to use is the quick swipes. For this one, we would start off by selecting our layer, hold Alt, hover to our stopwatch, click it, and then you'll access the coding text box. And what I do here is I set a keyframe from the beginning, and then go 1 frame out, make another keyframe, and then I put in my custom code for the quick swipe. Don't worry, this will also be provided in the project file. But once I have the code in, I click the second keyframe and then right click on it, go to keyframe assistant, easy ease out. So once you have the code in and it's set up, you can manipulate the clip in any direction that you want. So we'll move it to the left. We'll have it start to the left. And what this custom code does, it essentially has this whiplash effect where it kind of bounces left and right like this, which is really commonly used for edits. So yeah, you have this effect for a swipe. You can have that. And the cool thing is you can also copy this pattern, Control and then C and then Control V to the second clip. You can also have both of them. Now you have both of them doing the same technique. So when we press play, that's the first clip, second clip. And that's basically swipes in a nutshell. Another transition common in AMVs and game music videos are frame animations. Oh, it got dark again. Frame animations, also known as smear frames, is just taking clips one frame at a time and then just creating them to simulate motion, like motion blur or glitch effects or film burns. Those are the three general smear actions that we really use, smear frame actions. You'll see it a lot in different videos that have high impact songs or just really fast moving footage. That's the general thing that they like to use in between their clips for most editors to stitch into a flow. And so here we are in another setup. There's the first clip and then this is the second clip. And smear frames is basically making your own motion blur within each frame. So in here, you see that I have clip 1, but then I would break it down into one frame, I cut it out, and then another frame, I cut it out. So when you put it together, these 4 frames create a motion blur effect like that. And what I'm using for this motion blur effect is basically just directional blur. You can search it up on the effects and presets. It's called directional blur. And then basically you can just change the direction. So if you say you want to, instead of have it blur from up and down like this, have it blur to the right by just changing the direction. So say 90 degrees. So now that I have it blur on 90 degrees on all of them, so now what you see when we play it, the smear frames go to the left and right now instead of up and down. And that is the last speed transition that I use for most of my AMVs. So cool, now you got a flow going on. Last thing I want to add to this is just stay in the pocket when you're making your flow and stitching your clips together. What I mean by this is really try to emphasize every beat, every sound. Try to take advantage of every opportunity that you can add a cool flair to the song in unison with the footage. And it takes time and practice to stay in the pocket and just try to find your own style and groove. And that's the fun of it. Just every time you make an AMV, try to focus on really listening to the song. I try to compare it to like being a dancer. As a dancer, you listen to the music and you feel it with your body, and you try to transmit that emotion that you feel with your body through the song by trying to be at the same pace as it, and then trying to hit every single note as powerful as you can. So that's what it really means to stay in the pocket, just trying to hit every single note, really listen to the details, really try to emphasize and take advantage of that note or that beat or that hi-hat or that string of melody into the song with an awesome clip that you find with your anime footage or your game footage. So once you have the assembly cut done, then you cleaned it up with some transitions and flows, we go to the visual effects. This is the process by which imagery is created or manipulated outside the context of a live action shot in filmmaking and video production. Well, in layman's term, it means just taking the original footage and just spicing it up with effects from plugins or using motion graphics or adding typography or just adding different style to the frame so that it doesn't resemble the original shot. And so that is just that, style framing. So with style framing, it's basically like freestyling. And with style framing, it comes in many different flavors that you can choose from. You can create your own style. You can see here from 3D visualization, adding graphic designs in your AMVs, iconography, typography, sound effects, motion graphics. There's a bunch of different styles you can really look into designing your AMVs and game music videos. And that's basically the third phase of what I do when designing my AMVs, is really looking at what kind of style frames I can add into the video, what kind of theme, what voice that I want to give to the video, what kind of story I want to give to it, comes through style framing. And in the future, I'm going to do a video of different style frames that I've learned throughout the years and what I generally use now in my music videos. So look out for that. I won't be teaching it here because this is still a general video, just outlining how to make an AMV for everybody. So cool, now you've assembled your clips. Now you've created transitions and flows, and you've done your style frames to create an awesome visual image to your anime music video or game music video. What are the last steps? So before I go to the fine tuning phase, I generally like to clean up my syncs, apply sound effects if necessary, and add something made on my own. Hence why making style frames. I think adding something on your own is what really gives you originality aspect to your music videos, whether it being a game or an anime. And I really encourage you to build up that kind of exercise of just finding out something that you're really good at, something that you want to make your own, embody as your own. Try to make something new into this a hobby and post it. Now we come to the final step of the AMV or GMV editing process. Now you got this awesome edit that you just made and you want to post it. we gotta go through export management first. And basically what export management is planning, organizing, coordinating, and controlling all activities that goes into packaging a finished product or service. In this case, the music video. Alright, cool. Last step. Now we're ready to render and export our edit. We will start by double checking that we have everything synced up. All the video and the clips are synced up to the song and everything is just on point. And then from there, we would start by exporting. So to export simply, I'll just go fly by through this. You want to make sure that on the left side of your project panel, the composition that you're editing in is selected. So in this case is the main. And then from there, you want to just click composition on the top of the navigation bar and then click add to render queue. You'll see your timeline change to the render queue options. And then from here, all of my settings are just basically to click on lossless. And then from here, just have it set to H264. And then everything is the same. Format options are the same. And then for the CBR target bitrate, I usually go for about 20, which is because we're only exporting in 1920, and click OK. And just to double check, the format is just H264. And then have your CBR target to 20 megabytes per second. And then we just click on the output and specify it to where you want it to go. And then for render settings, I just keep it on the default best settings. And then from there, we just click render.
Tell me what you talking through the late night. I'll be on the way on a late night.
And there you have it. You just finished your first music video. Congratulations. It's your very first edit. Hopefully the steps that I outlined throughout this video were really helpful and really easy to follow along. This is the current design process that I make when making an AMV music video. And it's something that I made throughout the years, again, like I said, and it's the most easiest and the most stress-free way of really having to think about anything. And it's set up in a way that makes it easy for me to generate ideas. I have a constant flow of imagination when going through making a music video. It's easy, just 1, 2, 3. I know where I'm at. What am I missing? What can I fine tune on? What can I clean up on? It just has everything, every checkpoints that I need just to make a really cool and awesome video to share on the socials and online. Final word of advice, just have fun with it. It's a hobby at the end of the day, but has the potential to become something that you're really good at and spark a career or purpose or something in life that you want to pursue. For me, taking my case, I ended up loving design. All of my fundamental skills, how I think, all of my foundational thought process in design came from making AMV music videos, which is kind of crazy to think about. So I think just having fun and really enjoying making these videos, edits, is what it's all about. Also, everyone just starts from somewhere, right? If you don't have a really kitted out setup, you can always use CapCut or Final Cut Pro and then just stitch clips together through a music video. And if you're really itching to get into, more effects, you can try out DaVinci Pro, or you can try out DaVinci Resolve free. I think it also has the editing software, or it also has the graphs that I showed in After Effects. And you can play with that. You can also use Sony Vegas Pro and After Effects, like I said, but that is at a price point. But what I'm trying to say is that you don't really have to go full out at the start when making AMVs or GMVs. Just take baby steps and find out what's fit for you and what you really want to do with your music videos, and then just take it one step at a time. All right, so cool. So one last thing before I go, please send me these AMVs or GMVs that you make from this video. I really want to see what you guys create out of the design process that I laid out for you guys. I plan to make a reaction video to them, and so we could all watch it together and just really share with the community of what we're creating together. All right, that's it for me. Thank you for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Peace out.